to the public.
I'll take a stab at that. Don't think we have to get too deep into conflicts other than to say, first we have to remember that if the redevelopment agency were to be voted on today and created, and nothing else happens ever again, council never takes another action with respect to the redevelopment agency, the redevelopment agency will have nothing to do. There will never be a redevelopment agency, and it will have nothing to do. So as far as tonight's vote is concerned, this is simply to create the agency. For the agency to have something to do, it's going to have redevelopment projects, and the projects they're going to have to be the designated redevelopment entity. It's going to have members. It's going to have bylaws. It's going to have to do all these things. So as far as my opinion is concerned, owning property anywhere in this township, if you were Harts and you owned Harts and you were sitting up there today, frankly, I think you could vote on it because there's not a vote to send that project to the entity, to the agency. When the vote comes up, if it does, and the council is to try and determine whether to put the Revlon project or the Jackson Avenue project to the entity, at that point in time, if a council person owned a piece of property in that area and it was to be sent to the agency, even before that happens, if it's to be blighted, determined an area needed redevelopment, the council person couldn't vote on it. If it's to be determined to be a redevelopment plan, the council person can vote of it. I'm pretty comfortable with that process will happen appropriately at the appropriate time, but as far as whether you could vote on the creation of a redevelopment agency, owning property in the township is immaterial.
And through the council president, and knowing that, Joe, then what's the purpose of the redevelopment agency? If you're making it or creating it for a purpose, and then at the end of the day, you absolutely can't move it forward in any direction. You've just spent $165,000 of our tax dollars for nothing.
It's a process, right?
Okay,
and there's steps to the process. You can't have a redevelopment project to go to the agency. You have an agency, so there's a process, and the process is to create the agency. The next step in the process will be for the council to consider. I'll use Harts because there is only two, as far as I know, two redevelopment areas in Edison today, and Harts is one of them. If the council were so chose, it could designate the agency as the redevelopment entity to implement the Harts project. But take, for example, Amboy Avenue, which is, I believe, an area in need of revitalization district.
Yep.
That has nothing to do with redevelopment law. That's a zoning district. In order for it to end up with the agency, the council would have to determine that it's either an area in need of rehabilitation or an area in need of redevelopment, which I don't know if that covers that area because the Jackson Avenue area is very big and I haven't looked at the entire area. But until that next step occurs, it's just not going to happen. The other thing is, until the budget's approved with a funding item, the agency won't have any money to retain people. So I sense from the audience and from a lot of people a concern and a fear of the redevelopment agency. And what I'm trying to get across to the council and the public, and this is my legal opinion, whether you create a redevelopment agency is a business decision for this body, but there are controls in place, important controls on a redevelopment agency that are going to be there for every project and through the process. And as I've tried to explain, the council has many opportunities to establish the project, the area in need of rehabilitation or area in need of redevelopment. That's the council decision. The redevelopment plan, that's the council decision. The designation of who implements the plan is the council decision. And then if the redevelopment agency is not complying with that plan, the council's unhappy with it, they have the right to either tell the agency to get busy doing it if they're not, or to stop them from doing something that's not consistent with the plan. So there are steps along the way. In Edison, you also have the benefit of referendum and an ordinance on eminent domain. That is in full force and effect in this town. That applies to this redevelopment agency. So, getting back to the comment that I'm recommending these changes, I'm not recommending the changes. I'm just saying that those are not substantive changes because they're a restatement of the current law. As a general rule, I don't find it, as a lawyer, to be helpful to restate the law, in every detail in the ordinance. So if you were asking me to recommend it, I would probably recommend not making non-substantive changes because you're not changing anything. That's why it's not substantive. The fact is, the redevelopment agency is going to be subject to the ordinance that was approved by the voters. It will not be able to use eminent domain. Section 18.36 of the municipal code will apply to the municipal councils. The municipal council can't give that right. That's just the way it is. So there's a lot of discussion about it, but at the risk of using the wrong words, it's sort of a non-issue because it can't happen unless the voters change the referendum. So that's a concern or a fear that people have that I think they should feel comfortable that their referendum is in full force and effect, and they've protected themselves. And certainly that's true for a number of the other things. I think that it's important for the public and the council to be vigilant through the process, to carefully consider the redevelopment plans, as this council did with Hearts. Councilman Versigliano, we worked closely, we did a tremendous job. I believe this council, it took us a long time, lots of meetings, small groups, big groups. We fought through it, we got a plan that makes some sense for the township, and now it's in the next step. And that process will continue for each project, and this council, or the next council, the council after that, 10, 15, 20 years from now, with a new project that we can't envision what it is today, a majority of that governing body, whoever they will be, elected by the people, will have that decision to make about that project. You're just establishing an implementing agency that many towns, not all towns, have found it to be beneficial in the state of New Jersey. Some haven't, some have. It's a matter of, I guess we'll find out, a difference of opinion. Reasonable people could differ on that issue. But there's certain things that are being said that I'm concerned are just not accurate. Reasonable people will disagree on whether or not you should have an agency or you should keep with the council. It's a healthy discussion. But whether the agency can run amok with eminent domain, it just simply legally can't happen. Whether the agency can do certain other things that have been suggested, it just can't happen under the law, unless they do something illegal, of course. But then the council could. Many of the problems that were discussed or identified in your letter are towns that don't have redevelopment agencies. Long Branch doesn't have a redevelopment agency. It was one of the items that you highlighted. So redevelopment can run amok, whether it's a council doing it or an agency doing it. It's just critical that the council and the plan are vigilant, and the agency are professionals and do the right thing. And if everyone's working together, which is the way, from my experience, Edison has operated for my year and a half here, after discussion and hard work, the Hearts plan came together. It wasn't easy. Lots of people had difference of opinions on many issues. I expect that Edison will continue to do that for every project going forward, with or without a redevelopment agency. And again, whether you have one or not, reasonable people could disagree, but the real concern about big housing projects and buildings the size of New York City, can't any of that have pilot agreements? They don't happen without this governing body, or the governing body that's elected 4 years from now, or the governing body saying, we're okay with that.
Thank you, Mr. Karabinchak. Ms. Walke?